The primary question everyone asks themselves is whether you should buy, sell, or hold Bitcoin at an all-time high. In this video, I'm going to explain what I'm doing and what you should be doing with your Bitcoin. The markets are firing up as Bitcoin is approaching a new all-time high. Small disclaimer, this video has been made yesterday, so it could be that in the period in between uploading and shooting it, Bitcoin already made a new all-time high. In that case, we are currently enjoying the party, drinking champagne with a new Bitcoin all-time high, which is great. If not, then it's about to come. The question is, we need to answer first why Bitcoin is actually going up. And it's a good case that we are reaching towards a new all-time high, of course, but there are two ways of explaining the reasoning behind the current rise of Bitcoin. The first one is the famous M2 supply meme that's initiated by Raoul Pal. He did a speech at Sui Basecamp, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and everybody starts sharing the M2 supply chart where everything is driven by liquidity, which is, I think, the key principle of what we're going to be doing with the markets in the coming 1 to 2 years. But it's also going to be important to analyze liquidity the years after, as there are macroeconomic plays completely collapsing at this point. But the M2 supply chart works. This is one that basically says that we're currently approaching the all-time high, where we are about to have some slight cool down before we're going to continue. And every M2 supply chart basically says that within this quarter or beginning of Q3, Bitcoin is going to reach anywhere near 125K to 150K, which is great. That means that we're going into a new all-time high. So that is the first explanation of the fact that the markets are currently going up for Bitcoin. The second one is that the bond markets, again, are completely getting screwed. We've seen that the US has had some serious rallies already, but right now Japan is completely getting cooked with their interest rates, as those have been rallying substantially, and those bond markets in Japan are entirely collapsing at this point. And I've brought a chart to show to you, which is not an altcoin. It is the 30-year yields. So basically the inverse is the underlying value of the collateral, which is the bond. It's up 400% in the past 3 years, and it's up 40% in just the past month, which means that something is breaking, which is not great. If we see these type of signals in the markets taking place, then a shock is inevitable, and it will be taking place in other economies. So it looks like we are currently watching or monitoring the debt bubble collapsing, and we are basically rotating it through from one country to the next one. We've had China collapse, we have had the US slightly collapsing, and now we have Japan collapsing, which is basically going into Europe and into the US. So what does it mean if the rates are going this high in Japan? Well, basically what it means is that people are selling their dollars or other currencies to be buying back the treasuries or the government bonds, trying to stabilize the markets in Japan. So that's the reason why the dollar is currently falling, and the government in Japan is probably trying to buy back those bonds in order to get the rates down, as a high rate in this fast manner is shocking for the economy. Ultimately, this leads towards ripple effects, and that is going to cascade towards other foreign bonds, which means that people fly out of Japan, and other people, like one party is trying to buy back, the other one is trying to get out of the government bonds because their underlying collateral is losing value, and they fly towards other assets, which means that they fly towards other countries. And as the chart shows, it is not like they are buying other bonds, as all the government bonds in other countries are currently losing value. The US government bonds, the 30 years above 5%. Europe is going up even more. So they are flying to something else, which is gold that keeps going up, Bitcoin, which also keeps going up, And in the coming few years, they are going to fly towards DeFi, which is a safer place than government bonds. So what does that mean? Within the next 1 to 2 months, if the yields are going to go up on the Japanese bond market, it's going to basically fall into the US pocket. And therefore, policymakers like the Fed need to step in to ease, to print, to buy back those bonds, to stimulate the economy in order to avoid a big collapse. The debt levels are way too high, so we start to see the same signals as what we've seen in 2006 or in 1928. And aside from that, the year-to-year real estate prices in the US for 27 of the 52 states have become negative. So the first slight signs of a potential recession and crisis are occurring. And that's why I wanted to bring two charts to you, which is the first one shows you the 1928-1930 cycle, where we basically started to go up and then had a big crash taking place. And the second chart I just wanted to show to you, which is we are still going up. But as you know, what comes up needs to go down, what goes down needs to go up. So the next long-term effects in the coming years are going to be extremely volatile and extremely decisive for your financial future, which means 1 to 2 years of maximum upwards momentum is likely going to come, where Bitcoin is going to be the outperformer, and then 2 to 5 years of maximum destruction of the markets as the debt bubble collapses, as the US is currently having more than 9 trillion of debt that needs to be rolled over. So we are in the final bubble, and the signs are getting clearer and clearer, which therefore means that we are on the edge of the final run for Bitcoin, and we are on the edge of the collapse of the financial system through Bitcoin reaching new higher levels of all-time highs. And that brings me to the question, should you buy or hold or sell Bitcoin? Let's talk about the Bitcoin all-time high, which is always a great time, but it can be a little tricky at this point. And it's also a little bit simplistic to just look at the Bitcoin valuation against the dollar. It's not telling the entire story, and that's what I'm trying to give you in this part or through the charts that we are opening right now. First thing that I wanted to discuss is that usually around all-time highs, and secondly around round numbers, it's going to stagnate for a little bit because people will use it as a reference for take profits. And it's all depending on your own strategy, but if you are a big player and you were able to accumulate Bitcoin between 70 to 80K in a few 2 months ago, then this might be a position or a level where you're going to say, I'm going to take profits and just take the 20-30% that I could have made, which is quite normal. And then secondly, if people have been holding Bitcoin for a long time, especially during the periods right now, there is the discussion of Bitcoin having the peak of this current bull market, or we're approaching the end of the bull market as it's a 4-year cycle thesis, then that's always a period where people start to take those profits. And that's why all-time high levels are usually a very tricky period to go through. As you can see, we basically hit the all-time high at 107K first in December of 2024. We then had one test and that failed, had a pretty harsh correction taking place, which is also a very normal price pattern. And now we're again stagnating around the all-time high, which if I would be monitoring this, perhaps we test the all-time high, get a new all-time high, but it's going to take a little bit of time before we break through it. Because if you look at the historical price action, crucial levels to break through always take time. And in this case, we had the same period taking place in 2018, 2019, around 12K, which was the crucial resistance in 2017, that we tested in 2019, couldn't break through it. And again, in 2020, we stagnated there. And then we stagnated around the all-time high before we had the big surge. And the same can be said about the previous period that we witnessed once we wanted to break through the all-time high. Yes, in relative numbers, Bitcoin broke through it, made a new one. But technically, we have just been consolidating around the all-time high of November 2021 for approximately 6 months before we had that new rally all the way towards 105K. So it's not unusual to be having this period, to be having this consolidation, but it's still about to have a big breakout, I suspect, because if you use the Bitcoin valuation and you're looking at it versus the gold valuation, so Bitcoin USD divided by gold's price, then you can see that we're still beneath the all-time high of 2021. And there's still a lot more upside to come, which tells you that we had a period where gold was outperforming and Bitcoin wasn't really following through, as gold still has a higher performance than Bitcoin for the year. So there's still a lot more upside to come. And that also brings me to a second topic, to look at the altcoin valuations, because if Bitcoin breaks this all-time high, that should be the trigger where altcoins are going to outperform Bitcoin, as in previous cycles. When Bitcoin breaks the all-time high or starts doing that next leg up, that's the period where altcoins start to shine. And that's why I brought up this Ether chart, which is currently finishing off its entire bear market of 1200 days, as we are up approximately 40% against Bitcoin. And the good sign that we have here is that we constantly have a bigger breakout taking place on ETH rather than on Bitcoin alone every time Bitcoin moves up. And I've shown you the charts of the Chinese renminbi versus dollar. It bottomed in April, and Ethereum also bottomed in April. So this cycle is completely different. And I suspect, based from the data, that there is more upside to come, especially since that Ethereum has just barely started its bull cycle. When we're looking at the total market capitalization, basically the same chart can be shown. We had a very healthy retest taking place at the block at 2.3 trillion. And we're currently just having the final consolidation, probably some more sideways before we start to break through the all-time high of 3.6. And then the question is, how high is this going to go? The longer the bull cycle is going to happen, the higher the rewards will be, the higher the market cap will be. So if the bull market ends this year, I think 4 to 5 trillion is normal. But if we're going to end somewhere end of 2026 or even 2027, we might be revising those targets to 10 to 15 trillion. And then the final thing is the altcoin market capitalization, which is probably not a surprise. It's still down from the all-time high in 2021, which says that there haven't been any bull market as of yet. And as you zoom in a little bit more, you can see that we are having a very good TA way of going through this cycle, where we had this retest around 650 billion, flipped the crucial resistance at 774 support, and now we are having the final tests before we're going to rally towards the all-time high. So once it breaks through this level at 940 billion, the altcoins are going to surge more than Bitcoin, and the entire market carries forward. So all in all, that is not a bad sign for the markets. It's very difficult to analyze where we are in the cycle, because there's the conflicting theories between the 4-year cycle and the longer cycle. But all I know is that if we wouldn't have had the ETF, Bitcoin was currently swimming around 50 to 60K, and we would have been approaching the all-time high, the old all-time high. So it's still similarly to the previous cycles. The only difference is that the Bitcoin valuation is substantially higher, and I think that the real breakout is still yet to come. Now, the primary question is whether you should be buying, selling, or holding your Bitcoin at this all-time high test. And first of all, it's all depending on your own risk preferences, your own financial situation, and your own portfolio. It's not a one-size-fits-all sort of strategy that we have here. The only thing that I would like to say is that we're not at the end of the bull market, and that Bitcoin is the only asset that basically defends your portfolio against inflation or currency risk and so on. On the other hand, if your entire portfolio consists of Bitcoin, the higher we go, the more risk it implies for your valuation of your portfolio, because if I'm going to be wrong on my thesis that it's not going to be a longer cycle and the markets are going to reverse before that, it's going to provide you pretty heavy drawdown of maybe even 50 to 80%, which is something to take into account in your risk tolerance that you need to restabilize your portfolio. While if you don't have any position in Bitcoin, there is a big misconception that Bitcoin won't make you rich anymore. But I think that if you start building your portfolio and you start DCAing even at these levels, and you start doing it on a monthly basis where you consistently continue for the years to come, you start compounding your returns, and your returns will be great if you're doing that. So I'm sure that strategy still applies. So ultimately, I think that it's all on your own preference. But if we look at my portfolio, and I'm entirely into altcoins, my goal is still to make more Bitcoin through those altcoins, which means that if we look at the question, I'm actually buying or I'm holding at this point, as I think that the markets are in for a big surprise for the coming years and that there is more upside to be made before there's a big downwards crash going to happen. So that's my strategy, and I hope you have enjoyed this update. I'll see you again on Sunday. Ciao. During these markets, I'm always looking for opportunities to build my portfolio, and OKX is bringing you an opportunity. They are the first fully licensed exchange in Europe with the lowest fees. And to help you a little bit with your portfolio and to celebrate this milestone, they are giving away up to 50 euros in Bitcoin if you sign up today on the exchange. Signing up can be done within 5 minutes, and if you deposit 100 euros worth of crypto, you'll receive the first 20 euros in Bitcoin. Start rebuilding your portfolio today. Go to the link in the description or scan the QR code and enjoy up to 50 euro in Bitcoin.